Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jill Sollazzo. I'm one of the reference librarians here at East Hampton Library. Thank you for joining us tonight for Haunted Libraries of the U.S. and beyond. And if you attended this program last year, you'll recognize a lot of the libraries on the list. They're some of my favorites. But this year I decided to expand it and include a handful of libraries from outside of the United States, just to make it a little bit more spooky for the Halloween season. Uh, as you all saw, the event is being recorded. So should you have to leave early or you want to catch it again, you can find it on our YouTube page. You could visit East Hampton Library on YouTube, and it will be listed there as Haunted Libraries of the US and beyond. We have a lot of great events coming up on Zoom for the library in person. Of course, next Saturday, for anybody out in East Hampton, is our haunted library event where for one night only we turn our library into a haunted house. So for anybody interested, please visit our calendar. It's www.easthamptonlibrary.org. Go to the calendar on the 29th of October and you can sign up for a time slot to join our haunted library. And with that, I am going to share my screen so we can get going and take a look at some haunted libraries around the world. Okay, so this is our haunted libraries of the US and beyond. I just want to give you a quick note before we start going through them. You're going to hear me mention Carnegie libraries in relation to some of the US libraries several times throughout the presentation. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of what a Carnegie library was. Carnegie libraries were built with the support of self-educated millionaire industrialist Andrew Carnegie, who lived from 1835 to 1919. Carnegie and the Carnegie Corporation provided funding for 1,681 public library buildings in 1,412 U.S. communities between 1889 and 1923. To Carnegie, libraries represented self-education, so a library gift should represent self-help. Carnegie provided the building, but the communities provided the land and tax support for the libraries. And in terms of states in the program with the most haunted libraries, Pennsylvania actually tops the list with 17 that we know of, with Texas coming in a close second at 16. And I've tried to cover a wide range of libraries from all over the country and outside of the country. So here are a bunch of my favorites. First, I'm going to go quickly into libraries are haunted, and the short answer is yes. They generally fall into two categories, and category one is the building with a reputation, and that's the library where a convenient murder, curse, or other tragedy has occurred, and library staff can blame the odd noise, the occasional book falling off the shelf, or glitches in the air conditioning on the resident scapegoat. And no one reports anything too spooky, and the children's librarians can use it as a good time for story hour. And category two is the building without a reputation, but where things happen. So these are libraries where credible, responsible people observe enigmatic human shapes, hear disembodied voices, and witness other classic parapsychological events. And they give glib explanations about how the building must be settling and ring about as hollow as those mysterious footsteps late at night on the upper floorboards. And the library staff generally in category two will learn to live with its wraith, accepting the paranormal behavior as a normal working condition. So this is just a meme, and the ghost is saying, "Oh, I'm here to haunt your library." And the librarian says, "Oh, good, we can use another member of the committee." And the ghost gets very alarmed. And then I found this one. So the medium said, "You think this place is haunted?" And, "Oh, we know it's haunted," the librarian said. "Every library is. So many readers with unfinished businesses." And the medium said, "I can't do exorcisms." And the librarian replies, "No, they're also patrons. We want you to ask them how we can help them better." So with that, let's get started and take a look. So, first up on our list is the Webb Memorial Public Library in Morehead City, North Carolina. And this building was constructed in 1929 by local businessman Earl Webb as a commercial building that contained doctors' offices downstairs and a garment factory upstairs. His wife, who was a member of the Morehead Women's Club, asked her husband if they could move a small 300 book collection into one of the upstairs rooms, and the library was born. In 1936, the Webb's son, Earl Jr., became ill and died, and in his honor, the Webbs dedicated the building as the Earl W. Webb Jr. Memorial Library and Civic Center and opened it to all the citizens of Morehead City for community use. Paranormal researchers consider the Webb, as it is called, to be ground zero for paranormal activity in Carteret County, North Carolina. Staff and patrons have observed books moving on their own, strange smells, changes in temperature, and evidence from EMF equipment, which detects electromagnetic fields. Locals believe it's the ghost of Earl Jr. that haunts the Webb building, with activity continuing to this day. Number 2 is the North Portland Library in Portland, Oregon. And in 1912, the Carnegie Corporation of New York donated $60,000 for 4 new branch libraries, including one to replace North Albina Library. The land for a new North Portland Library came from the generous gifts of many community members, and construction soon started. The building opened to the public in 1913 and was constructed in a Jacobean style. Staff and patrons have reported paranormal activity at the North Portland Library almost since its inception. The most famous of the hauntings is the Shadow Man. After a renovation in 2000, the library included a security room where guards can watch cameras throughout the building. It's reported that on a cold, stormy night in December, the 2 guards were able to step outside of the room for a break to the vending machine when one of them spotted a man sitting in one of the conference rooms. They went to check, and the room was empty. When they returned to the security room, the Shadow Man was again seated in the conference room. All security footage at this library is recorded, so they actually have tapes to back up their story. Several staff members have also reported that a second-floor bathroom is haunted by a playful ghost that turns on the hand dryer. One of the staff members reported that he jokingly asked the spirit to turn on the hand dryer and said, quote, "I bet you a nickel you won't turn it on." Nothing happened, and he returned to his table in the break room, where a nickel sat waiting for him. In another incident, the same staff member recalls that he brought a group of school kids up to the bathroom who were shooting a documentary on paranormal places. When he opened the door and said, "Here's the hand dryer that sometimes goes on by itself," the hand dryer promptly turned on. Now, whether or not the hand dryer is just having a technical glitch, who knows? But they like to assume it's the ghost. Number 3 is the Millicent Library in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. Built to look like a Gothic castle, the building was donated to Fairhaven in 1893 by oil tycoon Henry Huddleston Rogers in honor of his recently deceased daughter Millicent, who died at just 17 years of age from heart failure. Millicent loved to read and had expressed a wish that her favorite vacation town have a good library. Contrary to popular rumors around the town, her body is not interred within the foundation, but a sketch of her was laid with the cornerstone of the building, and a stained glass window bears her likeness. And you can see in the top right corner the stained glass window and an image of Millicent above it. Visitors have reported seeing a young woman roaming the hallways surrounded by a blue light. She has also been spotted in the windows of the tower section of the library. Staff have reported that there is a second ghost within the building, an eccentric janitor who is said to have died in the building and has been spotted in the basement. This is the Deep River Public Library in Deep River, Connecticut. And as you might be able to tell, this library was originally a home and was built in 1881 by prominent businessman Richard Pratt Spencer, who lived to be 90 years old. Spencer lived in the home with his second wife and 3 children until his death in 1910. The house, considered more of a mansion, had exceptionally beautiful fireplaces, refined woodwork, and elegant touches, and parties were held there on a regular basis. When Spencer's widow died in 1932, a son sold the home to the Saybrook Library Association, which then in turn sold the building to the town for a small price in order to convert it into a library. Not much renovation had been done until 1995, when a children's addition was built to resemble the old porch, and you can see that on the picture on the left, which had deteriorated. The library has experienced paranormal activity since the 1950s, and more than 30 different paranormal investigations have taken place within its walls. Most groups have recorded EVPs or electronic voice phenomena, or have captured photos or videos. EVPs have recorded voices repeatedly asking, quote, "What is your name?" and "What year is it?" and have sometimes been followed by flashes of light. Staff members have heard a child's laughter when the building is closed, smelled cigar smoke, and have witnessed a woman floating down the stairs and looking out from an upstairs window. Passersby have also noted that the second floor looked like a party was going on when the building was in fact closed. And the show Haunted Collector from the Sci-Fi Channel even filmed an episode at Deep River, and an investigator observed a female spirit who is believed to be Mrs. Julia Spencer. So this is a building pretty much everybody knows. It's the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And this building has had a long and storied history with the paranormal. George Washington himself laid the cornerstone for the building in 1791, but it was the building's designer, William Thornton, that kicks off the building's history with the weird and paranormal. Mr. Thornton was not a professional architect. He was a distinguished polymath, or person of wide-ranging knowledge and intellect, and a doctor. He was called upon to save a dying George Washington, but was unable to arrive until after his death. Not one to be deterred, Mr. Thornton devised a plan to revive Washington from the dead, which included thawing him in cold water and giving him a blood transfusion from a lamb. Naturally, Martha Washington declined his offer. The building was once labeled the most haunted building in the world by the Philadelphia Press, and is believed to be haunted by numerous individuals and even a demonic cat that was spotted before the assassinations of Lincoln and Kennedy, and before the stock market crash of 1929. What is now the Speaker's Hall was the original Library of Congress in 1800, and that's the picture on the bottom left. It is said that the ghost of a male librarian haunts the hall, as well as the rooms to the west of the rotunda, searching for $6,000 in registered bonds, which he stashed in the pages of some obscure volumes. He never married, and he never had children, and retired from the library due to mental health concerns over the loss of his mother with whom he lived. He has been spotted roaming around looking for his lost money. And it's said that when the library moved to its current location in the Jefferson Building in 1897, workers actually did find money stashed within books as they were moving the collection. This building is the Parmley Billings Memorial Library in Billings, Montana. So the building pictured is now the Western Heritage Center, but it was the original location of the Parmley Billings Library. And this building in the pictures was built in 1901 and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It was named after Parmley Billings, the son of town founder Frederick Billings. Parmley died suddenly at the age of 25. The library then moved to a building that was previously occupied by Billings Hardware and the Broadway Furniture Company, and that building was demolished, and the now Billings Public Library is an entirely new building. But for the purposes of this program, we're going to look at this original building in the pictures here from 1901. So the original building has been said to be haunted by several spirits. A tall man dressed in white has been spotted in the staff room, and staff and visitors have spotted a female spirit that wears glasses. A man in work clothes has often been spotted on the second floor, and both a young man who whistles and a dark-haired woman have been spotted in the basement. Staff have often reported unexplained noises, swinging light cords, and a feeling of being watched in the basement. They've also reported hearing the sound of typewriter keys when no typewriters are in the building anymore. And the most well known spirit at this building is a child named Priscilla. It's said that they will often find child sized handprints in the attic dust and that she's been spotted roaming throughout the building. So, number 7 on our list is the Armstrong Osborne Public Library in Talladega, Alabama. And this building opened its doors in 1908 with the help of a Carnegie grant, as well as a local resident, Louisa Jemison, who donated the land and $10,000 to ensure the completion of the library. In 1979, a new building was built next door and the library was moved. The original building became the Heritage Hall Museum. Oddly enough, most of the hauntings are reported from the new building and not the original Carnegie building next door. So, staff have reported things moving on their own and other visual phenomena. Doors have opened and closed by themselves, sometimes being pushed open with force and surprising staff members. Books often move, sometimes flying off of shelves, which has happened in front of numerous witnesses. Many people, both staff and patrons, have seen orbs, and the shadow like apparition of a man has been spotted waving. Staff have named him Fred. The library actually houses a substantial Civil War collection, and staff note that most of the orbs and a lot of the activity seem to occur near that area of the library. I've actually visited this library. This is the new Hanover County Public Library in Wilmington, North Carolina. And the public library there has had a long history in the city of Wilmington, moving from the original City Hall building in 1906 to several others before finally settling into its current location, the former site of the original Belk department store, where the library opened its doors in 1981. The new Hanover County Public Library has a well-known Civil War collection, and it seems that at least one of the spirits haunting the building knows it too. Patrons and staff have seen a bearded, heavy-set man wearing 19th century garb near the collection. He's believed to be a lieutenant colonel in the 3rd Cavalry, 41st North Carolina Regiment during the Civil War, and once served as the mayor of Wilmington. Dubbed simply the Colonel, his portrait hung in the building and was often moved around the building when it was empty and not by staff. People have reportedly also heard footsteps that they believe is him walking in his boots on the upper floors. They've also reported that upon opening the building in the morning, they will find files spread out when they themselves put everything away the night before. There's one book in particular, The Papers of Zebulon Baird Vance, that always seem to be left out. They've dubbed this ghost the researcher, and it seems that the researcher also likes to play tricks on them. They've seen a female spirit who sometimes walks through the aisles with a book cart, and she's also reportedly been known to turn books backwards on the shelves and move things around. People, both staff and patrons, have reported taps on their shoulders and the sounds of pages being turned when they are the only person in the area. So number 9 is the Umatilla County Public Library in Pendleton, Oregon. And this library opened its doors in 1916 as another Carnegie Library in an Italian Renaissance Revival style building. The entrance of the building was modeled after the Pazzi Chapel at the Basilica di Santa Croce in Florence, Italy. And due to increased cost of upkeep and repairs, the library moved from its original location in 1996, and the Pendleton Center for the Arts moved in. So again, for the purposes of our program tonight, we're going to look at the original building, and I'm going to tell you the story of Ruth Cochran, assistant librarian and the president of the Eastern Oregon Library Association. On October 11th, 1947, Ruth suffered a cerebral hemorrhage as she was closing the building. She went to the bathroom to rest, but soon became too weak to move or summon help. The next day, the custodian's wife found her, still conscious, and she was taken to the hospital where she then died, according to the Pendleton East Oregonian. Spooky sounds and a general feeling of unease have been reported throughout the building and are mostly blamed on Ruth's ghost. A custodian who was in the library alone, doing some painting, heard the intercom system buzz repeatedly. On several other occasions, while he was the only person in the building, he has heard the intercom system buzz. The folklore is that when the intercom system buzzes, it is Ruth in the basement trying to get someone to come and help her. So this is the Phoenixville Public Library in Phoenixville, not Arizona, but Pennsylvania. The Phoenixville Library, which is another Carnegie library, first opened its doors in 1902. Since that time, it's undergone several renovations, with the most recent being in 2012, when it renovated and expanded its children's library. This library is believed to be haunted by the spirits of at least 3 individuals. One has been described as a woman wearing a bustle dress and is believed to be the original librarian. An old man and his dog are seen slowly walking through the building, and a young girl is said to haunt the children's library. Staff have reported seeing a rocking chair rocking on its own. Another staff member remembers seeing an apparition and then the front door open and an alarm go off when no one else was there. They've also said that they will make sure all chairs are pushed in at the end of the night, but upon entering the building in the morning, not only are the chairs pulled back out as if someone sat in them, but they are also often rearranged. So this is the Fort Concho Museum Library in San Angelo, Texas. And built in 1867, Fort Concho was constructed to protect settlers and the transportation routes between a chain of forts in the heartland of Texas. It was an active Army outpost from 1867 to 1889, and it's believed that some of its former inhabitants have never left. The former Bachelor's Officers Barracks is now the museum library, which is pictured in the top left. Lights frequently turn on after hours. A librarian reported that she was working on a microfilm reader one evening looking at the names of people who died at the fort. The back door started opening, so she called out, "Hello," and it stopped. No one came in and no one was outside, but she stated that because it's an old wooden porch, you can clearly hear when someone is coming or going. She's also distinctly heard the sound of someone cracking their knuckles. Another staff member always seemed to find herself locked out of a particular room. And the interesting thing is, it was a restored 19th century lock that requires a key to unlock it, and she had the only copy at the time. Most believe that these incidences are the work of Colonel Ranald Mackenzie, as he was a prominent officer at the time known for conducting campaigns on local Comanche. He stayed in these barracks as it was a central point for him to oversee the fort, and he was well known for cracking his knuckles. Another frequent visitor to Officers Row is Edith, the 12-year-old daughter of Colonel Benjamin Grierson. Edith passed away in an upstairs bedroom, and she's often seen playing jacks in her bedroom. She's actually looked so alive that a delivery person bringing flowers to the bedrooms remarked to the woman at the front desk how well behaved her daughter was. So I know you're all looking at this picture wondering why this very modern building's on the list, but I will tell you. This is the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And the northeast corner of the main branch of the Allen County Public Library sits where the Brackenridge House once stood. The Brackenridge family and their house saw its fair share of tragedy. In 1891, the patriarch, Judge Joseph Brackenridge, died in the house of natural causes. In 1893, the son Robert went out into the barn to shoot rats, and his brother found him the next morning with a gunshot wound to the right temple. In 1895, Robert's grandmother collapsed on the stairs and died. Matriarch Eliza then sold the house to the city in 1898. The house was torn down in the mid-1960s, and the oldest part of the library sits right where the house once stood. A children's librarian stayed after hours to work on a project and recalls hearing the door to a stairway open. She heard footsteps and the door opened again, but when she called out, no one answered. This particular door requires an employee badge and it beeps when you swipe the badge. There were no beeps. Staff have also reported seeing the spirit of a construction worker wandering the building on several occasions. And this library actually houses documents from the Lincoln collection, so they believe some of the activity they experience might be connected to that, though whether or not it's President Lincoln himself remains to be seen. So this building is the Cairo Public Library in Cairo, Illinois. The Queen Anne style building that houses the Cairo Public Library was a gift to the citizens of Cairo from Mrs. Eliza Stafford in 1884. In the 100+ years of the library's existence, only 7 librarians have served. Few changes have been made to the library since it was built. And the Cairo Public Library is believed to be haunted by the spirit of a young patron named Toby. He's usually found on the second floor, hanging around the special collections room. A children's librarian heard a chair squeak in front of her, as if someone had sat down, but no one was there. Staff and patrons have also heard footsteps, had lights turn on and off by themselves, and watched a rocking chair rock on its own. 2 staff members also once saw a ghostly light rise up from behind a desk, pass an office, and go into the stacks. So number 14 on our list is the Houston Public Library in Houston, Texas. The Edison Building opened in 1926 as Houston Public Library's Central Library. Designed as a Spanish revival, it replaced the prior Carnegie Building, and it's currently listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The building is named for Julia Bedford Edison, who served as the system's first head librarian for 40 years. Today, the building houses the library archives, manuscripts, and Texas and local history departments. It's not often that you get a complete resume of your resident ghost, but in the case of the Houston Public Library, that's actually exactly what we have. The afterlife resident of the Edison Building is a man named Julius Frank Kramer, and not only do they know his full name, they also know how he died, a pulmonary hemorrhage. The library actually has a file on Julius that they will provide to interested patrons. He didn't have a long work history, but one thing was similar throughout. His place of work was also listed as his place of residence. He started out as the custodian of the original Carnegie Building and eventually became the security guard slash gardener slash custodian slash janitor of the Edison Building until his death in 1936. The side street entrance of the building is listed as his last known place of residence. Julius was known to practice playing his violin after hours, a practice that continues to this day. Allegedly, staff have heard uplifting Strauss waltzes being played after the library is closed. Sheet music is occasionally found scattered on the library floors. And people actually often hear the sound of a dog's nails clicking, which they believe to be Mr. Kramer's German Shepherd. This is one of my favorite libraries. This is the Jefferson Market Library in New York City, which is actually part of the New York Public Library System. Originally a courthouse, the Jefferson Market Library has served the Greenwich Village community for over 30 years. The building, which is a New York City landmark, was designed in a Victorian Gothic style. It was erected along with an adjacent prison and market during the years 1875 to 1877 and cost the city almost $360,000. What the city got for its money, in addition to an architectural gem, and it was voted one of the 10 most beautiful buildings in America by a poll of architects in the 1880s, was a civil court on the second floor where the adult reading room is now, and a police court, which is now the first floor children's room. The beautiful brick arched basement, which is now the reference room, and you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, was used as a holding area for prisoners on their way to jail or trial. The building sat adjacent to the Jefferson Market Prison and later the New York Women's House of Detention. Actress Mae West was tried here soon after on obscenity charges when her Broadway play Sex became a target of the Society for the Suppression of Vice. West received a $500 fine, 1 day next door in the Women's House of Detention, and 9 days at the workhouse on Welfare Island, which is now Roosevelt Island. After sitting empty for decades, the building was saved from demolition and converted into a library that opened its doors in 1967. Both visitors and staff have reportedly seen figures walking along the clock tower balcony, and that's an area that's closed to the public. People have also reported a female spirit who will try to get their attention, wave and smile at them, and then disappear. Female spirits have also been spotted roaming the garden next door, which is where the detention center stood. It's believed that these are the restless spirits of former inmates. So this is the Los Angeles Public Library in Los Angeles, California, and we're actually going to look at two locations out there, the Central Library and the Cypress Park branch. So prior to the original library building being built, the property was home to the women's teaching college called the California Branch State Normal School, or just the Normal School. They trained future teachers and started operations in 1882, and the building was demolished in 1924 to make way for the library. The original Los Angeles Public Library Central Library, which is the building on the left, was built in 1926. The building suffered from overcrowding and physical deterioration and was slated to be demolished and replaced. After much debate, the building was saved and a significant addition was added on. But just 3 years after a plan was in place for the addition, the library suffered a terrible arson fire. And any readers in our program tonight could read Susan Orlean's bestseller, The Library Book, which actually tells the tale of this dramatic story. And the building finally reopened in 1993. So staff are frequently taken on a stairwell safety tour that guides them through a maze of long, lonely corridors snaking under and around the staff side of the building. And the bottom right-hand image is one such corridor. Staff have frequently reported seeing apparitions of women dressed in turn-of-the-century garb in these tunnels. Whispers, knocks and bangs, and moving shadows have also been observed. The Cypress Park branch, which is in the top right corner, has actually been listed among LA's most haunted places. This building's pretty new, having opened in 2001. A translucent male has been seen floating near the fireplaces. Ghostly whispers are heard in the men's room. People have reported lights turning on and off and shadows moving in windows when the building is closed. And of course, the only proven ghosts seen at the Central Library are the movie magic ones that were created by the Ghostbusters film crew. The basement of Central Library and several other spots within the building were featured in the movie to represent New York Public Library. So number 17 is the Harvey Public Library in Harvey, North Dakota. And it was built in the late 1980s on the former site of the Eberlein home. In 1931, Sophie Eberlein was murdered by her second husband in the bedroom of their house. It's believed that Sophie has remained behind to make her presence known within the library. Lights have constantly been known to turn on and off, something electricians cannot find a reason for. A librarian had a favorite colorful book she would use for story time, and she always put it in the same spot to easily access it. One day it was gone, and for a week it's remained missing. Then one day the librarian walked into the room and found the book sitting in plain sight. Perhaps Sophie got tired of hearing the same story. Staff members' keys have gone missing, and staff will often say, "Okay, Sophie, I need to get home now," and their keys will reappear shortly thereafter. A patron once came in wanting to donate items connected to the family of her first husband, who came from the Harvey area. After talking with the women, staff discovered her first husband was the grandson of Sophia Eberlein. The woman's current husband, who was her second, came into the library and immediately reported feeling a sense of unease and said there was a presence in the building that didn't like men, or maybe just second husbands. He eventually left the building because the feeling got so strong. This is the Blanche Skiff Ross Memorial Library in Nevada, Missouri. And this library is located on the campus of the Cody College for Women. Prior to being a college, the buildings were the site of an American sanatorium where patients suffering long-term illness, most likely tuberculosis, were treated. And obviously, these buildings became well acquainted with death during that time. A student studying music at the college, Vera Neitzert, passed away at the school due to a candy making accident that caused severe burns over her body. She was treated and died in the old sanatorium. People have said they've seen a spirit, believed to be Vera, roaming the library and other parts of the campus. Staff and students have also reported hearing piano music late at night. While some believe it to be Vera, others believe it could be the former music director, Madame Blitz, who actually drank carbolic acid and died. So number 19 is the Bernardsville Public Library in Bernardsville, New Jersey. And the building that formerly houses the Bernardsville Public Library for 90 years was initially called the Vealtown Tavern. Constructed in the 1700s, the tavern was a stopover for the weary and thirsty travelers and served the officers and men of the Continental Army. The ownership of the tavern changed many times, but the lore of the sturdy clapboard building on Morristown Road has endured through more than 2 centuries. Currently, it houses a fitness center, and the image in the bottom right is actually the new Bernardsville Public Library at a different location. So the Vealtown Tavern was the scene of a tragic love affair between the innkeeper's daughter and a tenant, Dr. Byram. Just after the two were married, Dr. Byram was hanged by General Anthony Wayne for being a British spy, and his lifeless body was delivered to the tavern. Not knowing what was in the large pine box, Phyllis, the innkeeper's daughter, opened it. On seeing the bug-eyed corpse of her beloved, she became hysterical and suffered a nervous breakdown. The ghost of a woman in a long white dress has been seen frequently throughout the building. She started making appearances in 1974, around the time the building was renovated, and her weeping is still heard throughout the building. A 3-year-old boy once saw her and was spotted waving to her and saying hi. And Phyllis was so active when the library was still at that location that the staff actually issued her her own library card. So number 20 is the Hoyt Library in Saginaw, Michigan. And it was a gift to the city of Saginaw by one of its most prominent citizens, Jesse Hoyt. In his will, Jesse left the city a sum of $100,000 for the establishment of a library on a site he owned. And the Hoyt Public Library was opened in November of 1890. The site, prior to being owned by Jesse Hoyt, was the home of the original Saginaw Jail, which was known for its violent and ruthless inmates, often overcrowded during the lawless lumber era. The Hoyt Library is considered one of the most haunted locations in the Midwest. Many paranormal investigations have been done at the site, and a documentary was even made about one of the investigations. The building is haunted by a number of spirits. Visitors have heard the sound of typewriter keys coming from behind a door that leads to a set of stairs that's no longer used. Multiple patrons, when asking for customer service, have said they were aided by an elderly woman who brought them back to the desk and who they thought worked at the library. When they asked other staff members to thank her, no one had passed by the desk to enter or leave the room they were in. And they believe that that woman is the spirit of the first librarian, Harriet Ames. Other ghosts are there as well. The spirit of a child is said to haunt the west wing of the building. The ghost of a man in uniform is said to roam the halls where the Civil War artifacts are found. People have experienced books falling off shelves, cold spots, lights going on and off on their own, and more. Something out of the ordinary happening is considered a daily or nightly occurrence. And during the last century, several deaths have actually occurred within the library. The spirits of these people are believed to still be in the building, And these are areas of the building where some staff actually refuse to go. Number 21, sorry, is the Peoria Public Library in Peoria, Illinois. It was built in 1894 on the former site of the Gray home. And local history says that Mrs. Stevenson Gray lived in a home here around 1830 before family and financial hardships led to a foreclosure. Mrs. Gray was forced to leave, and she cursed the property and all of its future owners before she left. And some believe her curse actually came true. The first 3 library directors all died under unusual circumstances. The first died in a streetcar accident in 1915. The second died of a heart attack after a heated debate at a library board meeting in 1921. And the third committed suicide in 1924 by swallowing arsenic. In 1966, the library was demolished and a new one was built in its place, but many of the ghosts are said to still reside here as a result of Mrs. Gray's curse. Reports say staff members have heard their names being called when they are alone in the stacks or they feel cold drafts. Apparitions of a former library director have also been seen in the basement doorway. So the story of this library is probably one of my favorites. This is the Sweetwater County Library in Green River, Wyoming. In 1906, the Sweetwater County Library was built in Green River with a $20,000 Carnegie grant. In 1980, the library moved to a larger location 2 blocks east of the original library, where it remains to this day. And this is where the story gets interesting. The library, built in 1980, was built on top of a cemetery dating from the 1890s. And yes, I said on top of a cemetery. The cemetery was the first official cemetery for Green River. After a few short years, the cemetery ran out of space, and the city of Green River purchased 80 acres of land from the U.S. government with the intent to move the cemetery, which is now called the Riverview Cemetery. Once the Riverview Cemetery was prepared and ready for use, graves and tombstones in the original cemetery were excavated and reburied in the new cemetery. The city of Green River passed an ordinance that required all of the bodies to be removed. And due to a natural spring that runs through the area down into the Green River, the land there is actually very soft and constantly moving. And because of that constant movement, a lot of the graves shifted, and those people were never removed from the original cemetery. And it's also believed that there are some bodies there that were never recovered because of fear of smallpox disease. As the years progressed, the land was used as a park until temporary housing was built in 1944 with the return of World War II veterans. The housing was then torn down in 1956. During the building and demolition of the housing, human remains were found and buried at the Riverview Cemetery. The lot then sat vacant again for many years and had a swing set that local children would play on. In 1979, the Sweetwater County Library was built on the lot. During the excavation, crews working on the project discovered more human remains, including a skull with red hair. There are still instances where remains will surface due to the shifting land. In 1996, they actually did find more remains while doing pipeline work. And today it's believed there's still people buried in the back corner of the library property. So the building is said to be haunted by a number of beings, from children to a dog and cat. Almost since the day they've opened, they've had lights go on and off by themselves. Several staff members have seen electric typewriters and computers type on their own. Changes in temperature are often reported, and voices have been heard telling people to be quiet and whispering staff members' names. The staff actually keep a ghost log, which is available to view at the circulation desk. Entries are being made to this day, and here are a few examples. So this is March 3rd of 1993, and a staff member said, "I heard my name whispered several times, but no one was asking for me. When I told another staff member about it, they said they had heard their name whispered many times in the last 2 days, and no one was there." And the second entry is from April of 2008. "We had a poetry jam at the Sweetwater County Library on the evening of April 18th. After the show was over, there were several volunteers helping clean up. A man approached me and asked if there was another librarian working that he hadn't met yet. I assumed he meant during the day and asked what she looked like. He began to describe her as having black curly hair that was styled kind of high up on her head, and he said she wore glasses. Well, I was stumped and asked if she had worked earlier that day. He said, "No, right now, I just saw her." I said to him, "Wait a minute, you just saw her? There are no other librarians working tonight. Was she a real woman or a ghost woman?" The man said, "I don't know. That's why I asked." I asked him to show me where he saw her. We put a lot of items that we do not need in the back hallway, and this guy had been there alone retrieving some of it. There was a light on under the stairs. However, the light in the stairwell was off, and it was there on the landing in the darkest part of the stairwell, at the top of the bottom flight of stairs, that he saw her. He said she was so solid, he thought she was real, and that she wore a long white dress and just held eye contact with him for a couple of minutes, then smiled and went upstairs. Later, we turned on the light, and he noticed the picture of our first librarian in Green River that hangs in the stairwell. He said that the woman he saw looked just like her. There was definitely a presence in that area, for right as he showed me where he saw her, the hair on my arms stood up. So number 23 is the Easton Area Public Library in Easton, Pennsylvania. In 1895, a library association was formed in Easton with the purpose of providing a library space for the residents. The association received a Carnegie grant and had to find a suitable piece of land. The library opened in 1903 on the best available piece of property in town, which turned out to be the oldest graveyard in town, which by that time was no longer in use. That cemetery, the German Reformed Cemetery, was the final resting place of 514 souls. Families of the deceased were tasked with moving the remains of their loved ones to make room for the library. However, 30 bodies remained unclaimed. Two of the bodies, Elizabeth Bell, Mammy Morgan, and Easton City founder William Parson, were moved to other areas of the grounds. The remaining 28 were unceremoniously put in a cement vault along with other unclaimed body parts, creating an unmarked mass grave in 1903. There are sources who claim that only 11 bodies were put in the vault and the remaining bodies were left where they were found. The library then paved over the vault and some of the remaining graves, and that is part of their parking lot to this day. People have reported seeing the restless spirit of Mammy Morgan looking for her resting place. Doors open and shut, sometimes with force. Books fly off the shelves, and cold hands have been felt playing with hair. File cabinets have been heard opening and closing on their own as well. So number 24 is the Willard Library in Evansville, Indiana. Opening in 1885 on donated land from Willard and Lucinda Carpenter, the Willard Library is the oldest public library in the state of Indiana. Willard Carpenter laid out in a letter to the trustees how he was donating land for the purpose of a public library to benefit the citizens of Evansville, and that as per his instructions, the library should be named the Willard Library. He was inspired by the Emma Willard School of Troy, New York, and always wanted to name an educational institution Willard. The Willard Library is somewhat famously haunted by the ghost of the Gray Lady. The Gray Lady is thought to be Louise Carpenter, the daughter of the founder of the library, Willard. When Willard Carpenter passed away, he left the entirety of his estate to his businesses and the library. Louise Carpenter sued the library board for what she thought was hers, claiming that her father was not in a sound state of mind when he wrote his last will and testament. Louise Carpenter lost the case. Now she's believed to haunt the library until she gets what she is owed. The Gray Lady was first spotted in 1937. A custodian arrived in the middle of the night to stoke the furnace in the basement. He put his light down, and when he picked it back up, he reported that there was a woman in a long gray dress with a veil over her face standing in front of him. As he was supposed to be the only person in the building, he said something to her and she disappeared around the corner. And he's actually the only known employee to quit because of her. She's known to haunt specific rooms in the building. The building is 3 stories tall, and she's been spotted on 2 of the 3 levels. She's been seen upstairs in the local history department quite a lot. She's also been seen downstairs in the children's department and in the hallways downstairs. And the children's department is actually considered the most haunted spot in the building, especially the story pit area. She's also been known to play with the elevators, as people on the first floor will note they move on their own. So the Gray Lady is so popular that the library has set up a ghost cam throughout several rooms she is known to visit. Anyone can go onto the site willardghost.com and click on a room she has been known to frequent to see for themselves if they can spot her. And these pictures on the right-hand side are actually 2 screen captures from the ghost cams of what is believed to be the Gray Lady. So now we're going to travel outside of the US for a few of our libraries. And the first stop is the Africana Library in Kimberley, South Africa. The Africana Research Library owes its existence to the Kimberley Public Library, which was opened on July 23rd of 1887. The public library was converted into the Africana Research Library in 1984, which has since become one of the finest research libraries in Southern Africa. Its collection consists of books, manuscripts, maps, photographs, and other documentary material on Kimberley, the Diamond Fields, the Northern Cape archaeology and geology, and many thousands of items celebrating the region's past and its role in the history of South Africa, and indeed of all of Africa. A credited librarian was not actually hired for the library until the early 1900s, and his name was Bertrand Dyer. And shortly after starting with the library, he began to engage in a type of fraud. He would place orders for books, but inflate the price list presented to the city for payment and would pocket the extra cash. His scam was discovered, and he was so ashamed that he decided to commit suicide. He took cyanide, but it did not work immediately. He suffered in great pain for 3 days before succumbing inside the library, and it's believed that his spirit haunts the building. The library is now also a museum, and visitors have reported seeing a ghost of a man in Edwardian attire floating up and down the halls of the building. Some have observed him rearranging books on the shelves. Others have claimed that if they're having trouble locating a particular book, Dyer will help by knocking it off of the shelf. This is the library at Combermere Abbey in Cheshire, England. Combermere Abbey is a former monastery, later a country house near Burlingdon, between Nantwich, Cheshire, and Whitchurch in Shropshire, England. The abbey was founded in the 1130s. The abbey initially flourished, but by 1275 was sufficiently deeply in debt to be removed from the abbot's management. From that date until its dissolution in 1538, it was frequently in royal custody and acquired a reputation for poor discipline and violent disputes with both lay people and other abbeys. It was the 3rd largest monastic establishment in Cheshire, based on net income in 1535. After the dissolution, it was acquired by Sir George Cotton, who demolished the church and most of the buildings and converted part of the abbey into a country house. The house was remodeled in 1563 by Sir George's son, Richard Cotton, altered in 1795 by Sir Robert Cotton, and Gothicized in 1814 to 1821 by Stapleton Cotton, the Viscount Combermere. It remained in the Cotton family until 1919 and is still actually in private ownership. The library is said to be haunted by the spirit of Lord Combermere himself, who died in 1891 after being run over by a horse-drawn carriage. After staff reported sightings and other paranormal activity, a photographer set up a camera in the library. The camera's shutter was left open for 1 hour. The staff could claim no involvement with the photo, seeing as they were all at Lord Combermere's funeral, which was 4 miles from his home. When the plate was developed, a ghostly image appeared, and you can see that on the right-hand side, sitting in Lord Combermere's favorite chair. To the modern eye, it appears to be a simple double exposure, but at the time, many were convinced a ghost had been captured. Number 27 is the State Library of Victoria, Melbourne, Australia. It's located in Melbourne. It was established in 1854 as the Melbourne Public Library, making it Australia's oldest public library and one of the first free libraries in the world. It's also Australia's busiest library, and as of 2018, the fourth most visited library in the world. As it is Australia's oldest public library, it stands to reason that some of its visitors have never left. One of the most frequently spotted ghosts is said to be the spirit of a former librarian named Grace. She's friendly and seems to keep more dangerous specters at bay. There's also been the spirit of a well-dressed man of the 19th century, complete with curling mustache. He favors the music department and has a habit of pulling out books of music and leaving them scattered on tables. Staff have also reported the presence of a poltergeist that has been known to scare patrons with strange noises, glowing orbs, and sudden cold spots. In addition, staff have reported chairs flipping on their own, books have fallen off of the shelves, and lights have gone out on their own. Security in the building have frequently said they are afraid to do patrols at night, especially in the area of Ian Potter Queen's Hall, which is said to be the most haunted part of the building. This is the Morelia Public Library in Morelia, Mexico, and the construction of what was once the Convento de la Compañía de Jesús, or the Convent of the Society of Jesus, began in 1660 by decree from the Jesuit bishop Marcos Ramirez del Prado. It included the Jesuit college in addition to a church. And following Mexico's reform laws during the mid-19th century, a majority of the country's convents became the property of the state. Many of them were transformed into museums or other public irreligious institutions. In the case of this former convent, the collegiate building would be transformed into the current cultural center. And in the case of the former Temple of the Society of Jesus, its transformation into a library was completed in 1930 as an initiative by then governor of Michoacán, Lázaro Cárdenas del Río. Cardenas would become president of Mexico 4 years later, with significant support from the population of his native town, thanks to public works such as this library. The library houses important antique Mexican items and artworks. According to staff, spirits have been noticed throughout the years by both staff and patrons. People have reported machines being turned on by themselves and people getting touched when no one is there. A nun in blue is frequently spotted roaming the building and even following people. The library director is reported hearing footsteps behind him as he was leaving, but when he turned around, no one was there. Number 29 is the St. John's Library in Oxford, England, and it is a constituent college of the University of Oxford. Founded as a men's college in 1555, it's been coeducational since 1979. Its founder, Sir Thomas White, intended to provide a source of educated Roman Catholic clerics to support the Counter-Reformation under Queen Mary. The Laudian Library, forming the eastern range of the Canterbury Quad, was built in 1631 to 1635 by William Laud, Archbishop of Canterbury and president of the college from 1611 to 1621. Originally known as the Inner or Mathematical Library, it housed mathematical instruments, manuscripts, and other treasures of Laud's. The items were kept in cupboards, of which one remains in the Laudian Library to this day. And the library is believed to be haunted by the headless ghost of Archbishop William Laud, who was beheaded in 1645 following impeachment by Long Parliament. Guidebooks perpetuate the story by saying he disturbs readers by kicking his head along the floor. This isn't something that has actually ever been reported by living staff. However, on many occasions, readers have heard the sound of footsteps advancing and retreating along the floor of the long reading room, which was built by Laud. And it's known that Laud cared passionately about his library, and staff believe that he's actually a friendly presence. This next one's one of my favorites just because it sounds so cool. It's the Harry Price collection of magical literature at the Senate House Library in London. The basis of this collection is the library formed by the physical researcher and writer Harry Price. And it comprises nearly 13,000 books, pamphlets, and periodical titles, some rare, on all aspects of magic, printed between 1472 and the 21st century. Most books date from the 19th and especially 20th centuries. Outstanding holdings in this area include the first edition of Hocus Pocus Jr. from 1634 and multiple editions of Henry Dean's Whole Art of Legerdemain from 1727 and Professor Hoffman's Modern Magic from 1874. Among prophecies it holds, the works of Nostradamus and Joanna Southcott stand out. Other topics include witchcraft and the occult, abnormal phenomena such as ghosts, mediums, and spiritualism, scientific phenomena such as animal magnetism, and 18th century work on automata, fortune telling, astrology, and physical research. Price aimed at comprehensiveness, and multiple editions of various works include several editions of the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, which is from 1494, and every known edition of Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft from 1584 onwards. Price deposited his library in the Senate House Library in 1936 and bequeathed it to the University of London in 1948 with an endowment to increase the collection. Ever since the books and collection took residence on the 8th floor of the Senate House, the staff have reported strange activities, such as hearing loud laughter or whispering when no one is around, and seeing floating books. They've even reported seeing full blown apparitions, including a mysterious cloaked figure and a glowing blue lady. Somehow, these ghosts are always blue in color. And last but certainly not least on our tour of haunted libraries is the library I am sitting in, the East Hampton Library in East Hampton, New York. The library moved to its present location at the corner of Main Street and Buell Lane in 1912 on land donated by Mary Lorenzo Woodhouse. The architect Eimer Embry designed the building, which was also donated by the Woodhouses. The library is designed in a neo-Elizabethan style, since many residents of the time wanted East Hampton architecture to conform to that of a pre-17th century Kentish village, similar in looks to the one the original settlers had left behind. The library has undergone several additions throughout the years, with the most recent being the Children's Room and the Baldwin Room in 2014. Now, most of our experiences have come from staff, but I do have a couple of incidences with children. Staff have heard voices and footsteps and doors opening on their own when no one is around. Just last month, staff in our upstairs staff area reported a doorknob turning on its own when no one was behind the door. A page reported being touched on the leg when she was shelving in the fiction room. No one was behind her. And we frequently feel cold spots when walking through different areas. A light fixture came off of the wall in our reading room, and instead of falling straight down, it actually flew forward. And security video captures books falling in the children's room as if someone pushed them. Staff have actually also reported hearing a child crying after hours. And we've had two separate incidences where children have reported seeing a woman down the hallway in the picture dead center on the screen, which we call our cloister. Just a couple of weeks ago, a young girl with her father was hiding behind his leg because she reported seeing a creepy lady down the hallway. And when the dad looked, nobody was there. And a few years before that, we've had actually a couple of children who were walking through and stopped and looked down the hallway and waved. And when a staff member asked them who they were waving at, because there was no one there, they said the lady at the end of the hallway. So we've had the Long Island paranormal investigators here for two separate investigations. At the first one, in the reading room, an investigator asked if there was someone there to make a noise, and there was a knock. When asked to do it again, there was a second knock. A second audio clip came from the children's room, where a voice recorder captured the sound of blocks on the table when all of the toys were put away. Static cameras went off a number of times by themselves. Three separate investigators reported seeing someone when they were by themselves. One saw a woman peeking out of the young teen room. One saw a child run from the children's room back entrance to the toddler area, and one described a small boy sitting next to him in the fiction area. At the second investigation, a few EVP recordings, were received. One sounded female and the second sounded male and forcibly said to get out. And actually, as I'm sitting here, I have staff sending me additional things. And a custodian that was here when nobody else was in the building actually reported the elevator button lit up and the elevator came to the floor when they were the only person in the building and had not touched it. So I'll share with you, actually, see if I can get it to play. This is our children's room, and I want you to focus on the area dead center on the screen, the books on top of the bookshelf. Now, just for context, there's no windows near it, there's no vents, there's nothing that would cause this to happen. You will see a glare from person that's watching the security footage, but what you really want to focus on is the center of the screen. So let's see if we can get it to play. Hopefully it will. Maybe it won't. Well, it doesn't look like it wants to work with me today. But the image was the books here started from back here and toppled over in a line with a couple of them falling off the end. And to a lot of people, including the paranormal investigators, it appeared that the books were pushed at the beginning, causing them to fall. So I hope you've enjoyed our dive into the haunted world of libraries and that it inspires you to visit some on your travels. And I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type it in the Q&A or to put it in the chat. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you so much, Missy. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Again, you can catch this on our YouTube page. It will be available to watch in a few days on our YouTube page. You can simply search the Haunted Libraries of the US and Beyond at East Hampton Library. And everybody have a good night and have a happy Halloween and a safe one as well. Bye, everyone.